everybody in their life multiple times goes through hard times. That's just a part of life. Understanding that, you can't run from these hard times. You can't avoid them. You can't duck or dodge them. You're going to have to go through them. You're going to be faced with it. So when you're faced with these hard times, let's talk about some tools you can have to actually get through them and not make unhealthy decisions to try to just push them to the side and ignore them and numb your pain that you're feeling.
Hey friends, I've got something truly special for you today. I've brought in Eric Daddario, a youth mental health speaker, to share some insights on guiding kids through tough times and helping them make healthy choices in the face of pain and adversity. Eric's passion for helping adolescents stems from a deeply personal experience, the loss of his younger brother Brandon due to a fentanyl overdose. This episode is a reminder that as parents, our influence is a game changer. Imagine being the trusted adult your child turns to when life gets tough, preventing them from going down a dangerous path. Eric emphasizes this, urging parents to understand the profound impact they can have. And you know what? If you do one thing for your child today, make it listening to this very episode. Learn the 3 strategies Eric shares to be the trusted adult your child needs. Hi, I'm Billy, and this is the Unlock Your Child's Full Potential podcast. I'm a mom of 3 lovely girls, and I'm looking for answers. I'm looking for ways to fill the gaps left by the school system and teach my kids the lessons that are going to prepare them for real life. I want to learn practical tips that I can use to raise capable and confident young people who are kind, caring, and authentic, and who bring value to the world. I know it's a lot, but I think as parents, we have the unique role of nurturing the potential of the special human beings entrusted to our care. We can't expect school and the teachers to do everything, and we don't want to let the environment decide who our kids become. It's up to us to coach our children on how to be successful and fulfilled. That's my goal here. To talk to as many parents, educators, experts, you name it, and ask the questions. Look for the universal principles. Find as many tools as possible to be a better parent and give my kids a head start in life. If that resonates with you, join me every Wednesday and let's inspire each other to create an environment where our children can blossom into the best versions of themselves. Hi, Eric. I'm excited to have you on the show. You're a youth mental health speaker, and you help students make healthy choices when dealing with pain and adversity. What's your motivation to want to help adolescents? I'm sensing there's a personal story behind it.
There is. You're 100% right. And thank you for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. My purpose, my passion, this all comes together because I'll never forget the day that I walked into my younger brother Brendan's hospital room and the doctor said to us, "You're going to have to say goodbye to your brother." He looks at my parents and says, "You're going to have to say goodbye to your son." And this was because he had overdosed on fentanyl. And so I just thought to myself, what could have changed his outcome? How could this have been different? And I kept thinking to myself, if he had just made better decisions, And that right there is when I started this journey, this life's work of mine to help youth make better life decisions when they're going through the stressful, the struggling, tough moments that life throws at them. Because everybody, and it's important that youth understand this, everybody in their life multiple times goes through hard times. That's just a part of life. Understanding that, you can't run from these hard times. You can't avoid them. You can't duck or dodge them. You're going to have to go through them. You're going to be faced with it. So when you're faced with these hard times, let's talk about some tools you can have to actually get through them and not make unhealthy decisions to try to just push them to the side and ignore them and numb your pain that you're feeling.
Exactly. So what are some of the challenges that youths are facing these days?
It's a great question. Biggest challenges I get every single time I speak, whether it's at a high school, a college, whether I'm speaking to student athletes, the 2 biggest things are anxiety. I'm anxious. whether that's because they're not getting the grades they want in school, they're not performing at their sport, or they're just anxious, maybe still has to do with the pandemic a little, or they're anxious that they're not fitting into a group that they want to fit into. And there's plenty of other reasons, but those are some of the big reasons that I hear. And then the other big one besides anxiety is depression. I'm depressed because something happened in my life. Maybe my mother passed away, my father passed away, something happened with a brother, a sister, a close friend, or something, they didn't get into the school that they wanted to get into, or going back to sports, because I talk with athletes a lot also. I didn't make a team that I wanted to make. A lot of things happen in these kids' lives that maybe us adults may look at and say, well, it's not that big of a deal. You can get through this. But to them, in their world, it is a big deal. And it's much bigger than we think. And it affects them more than we think. Those are the two biggest things. And then also other things that I see people just stressed, just in general, because of things that may be happening in their life. A lot may be going on. Again, maybe they're going through the same things the person that has the anxiety or depression, but it's just not affecting them as much, or they're in that early stage right there of just being stressed out. So I would just say, like, those are the three biggest things I hear all the time: anxiety, depression, stress.
And what would be a healthy strategy to cope with these situations?
That's a great question. The thing I always tell the kids is nothing is too small to talk with somebody about. Let's say, for example, I just said that at the beginning stages when kids are just maybe stressed out about something, a lot of times youth will just think it's not that big of a deal. I'm just stressed out a little. If I just keep getting through my day, basically having the mentality of put my head down, I'm just going to get through it. If I can just put my head down and get through today, tomorrow it will get better. And they just keep saying that to themselves. And then over time, they realize that I'm not doing anything about it. It's not getting better. It's actually affecting me more. It's getting worse. So I always tell these kids, first off, there is nothing in your life that's too small to deal with, to talk with somebody about, to let down your guard and just let out your emotions and your feelings to somebody. Because so many times I hear something that was this small that really wasn't affecting me. I didn't think that was that big of a deal. All of a sudden, not too long after I don't deal with it, I turn around and now it's this big. And it's taking my life over. It's affecting me in a way I never thought it would.
That's a great point.
Yes, it's never too small to actually talk with somebody what you're going through. Because I actually find it's those small things that can just creep up on people. But for me, my big message is letting the guard down. Whether you're going through the anxiety, whether you're depressed, whether you're stressed, whether you're confused or just going through a tough moment in your life, whatever it is, whether you've lost somebody, whether somebody has cancer, whatever that stressful, struggling, tough moment is, I talk a lot about when you go through these tough moments, you have weight that you're carrying around. You have pressure. And when you do nothing to relieve the weight, the pressure you're carrying around, that pressure becomes tighter and tighter. The weight you're carrying becomes heavier and heavier. But when you take action, like letting the guard down, becoming vulnerable and asking for help, you start relieving some of that weight, relieving some of that pressure. And that is when you start going down that road of healing and dealing with what you're going through. And it's hard, right? It's hard for youth to do. It's not easy. But let the guard down, become vulnerable, and talk about what you're going through from a trusted adult.
So not to a friend, to a peer, but rather to an adult.
Well, I wouldn't say no, not to a friend. Here's what I would say about that. When you go and you talk to a trusted adult, they are really going to be able to help you get through tough moments, navigate you, direct you to people who can help you, especially if we're talking about at your school. You go to a teacher, they'll be able to get in touch with the psychologist, the nurse, the person who you need to talk with. If you don't feel comfortable going to a nurse. Now, I will say this. I'm not saying don't go to your friends. Great point. Going to your friend and letting them know, look, I'm really struggling. I'm really going through a tough moment. Can you be there to support me Can you be there to help me when I have this conversation with that trusted adult? And what that does is when you have someone by your side, I feel like this is true with a lot of things in life. When you have someone by your side and you have this conversation with that trusted adult, it makes the conversation a little easier because you have a friend by your side, right? And whenever I talk, again, I just mentioned I talk at schools and I talk to athletic teams. I rarely get a person who comes up on their own and says, look, and I need help. What do I do? Usually they come up with the teammate, they come up with a friend, a group of friends, and they say to me, I'm struggling, I need help. Because when we have that group of friends around us, whether it's one, whether it's a handful, it shows that they support us, that they care about us, that they want to help us. And so that just gives us a little more strength. It gives us a little more courage to be able to take action. So I'm not saying don't go to your friends, but who should you go to really start this healing process? An adult you can trust, because they're going to be able to actually get in touch with whoever they need to get in touch with to help you through what you're going through.
Okay, if they ask for help, that's good. But if they don't, how can a parent tell if their kid's struggling? Are there any signs that we should be aware of?
That's a really good question. I'm going to give you some signs, but at the same time too, and we're talking about, because we could go through a list of things like, okay, this is the sign for anxiety. This is the sign for depression. This is so I'm going to give you a broad overview of some things you can look for, because we're not going to go through every one. That would take a while, but
yeah,
a few of the signs that you see a lot of the times is something that really interested them, something that they loved, whether it's playing a sport, whether it's playing an instrument, whether it's being artistic and drawing. All of a sudden, this thing they had so much passion for, so much love, they just don't care about it anymore. A lot of times you think to yourself, you used to love that. That right there is what I like to call it a red flag. Another thing is when they're struggling with something, they can stop eating. They may not have the appetite to eat. It could be the opposite. They could be eating more than usual. Another thing too is a lot of sleep. They're sleeping more than usual. But again, this is hard because they may not be eating because of another thing. They may be eating more because they're growing. They may be sleeping more because they're growing, right? When we're talking about youth. So this isn't an easy thing to navigate. Another thing that you could see is they have a short temper, outbursts.
But don't all teenagers do?
Exactly. So this is why it's right. I mean, these signs right here, these signs are signs when kids are struggling. But then here's the biggest thing I always say is that as a parent, you have a feeling. You have the feeling something's off here. Something is off with my son. Something is off with my daughter. But I hear because I talk to parents too about, and we'll get into this in a minute, about how to become that trusted adult for your son or daughter so they'll approach you instead of making unhealthy choices. But a lot of times parents will say, I had that feeling, but I just brushed it off thinking it wasn't, I'm being a helicopter parent, meaning I'm looking too much into it, right? And I would say for you, you have that feeling of something's off, something's wrong. I would take action. I wouldn't ignore that feeling like parents do a lot of the time. And you approach them and they say nothing's wrong. You find out nothing really is wrong. Okay, I'd rather you take action than not take action and something be wrong, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So
yeah,
it's hard because a lot of the times the things that kids may be struggling, the signs of struggle, they may be correlated to other things too. But then when we get into, let's say, for example, like substance use, let's say we're talking about kids using substances, coming home late at night with the glassy eyes, right? You'll be able to see it when we're talking about using, you'll be able to see the pupils change, whether they're taking pills, whether they're smoking. Again, I talked about losing the weight. They can be losing a lot of weight because they're using and they're sleep. Again, talking about the sleep, right? Sleeping a lot, not eating. So again, that's why it can be hard because a lot of these things, as I just mentioned, It's important that parents understand that it could be correlated to something else. But those are big signs that I saw with my brother when he was using those things that I just talked about. And I think that, those are the big signs right there when somebody's struggling through something.
And what's a parent's first step once they realize that something's wrong?
To approach their son, to approach their daughter, and sit down with them and talk with them. Talk with them in a certain way, not with the attitude, with the language of, are you using, let's say, for example, we'll talk about drugs, right? Let's say you have this hunch that your son, your daughter's using drugs, and you just say to them, you come at them with so much intensity, like, what's going on? Are you using, right? And you're pointing your finger like this and you're getting upset. How do you think that's going to make your son or daughter feel when you come at the conversation like that?
Well, they'll deny.
Yeah, they'll deny, because right then and there, they don't want to get in trouble. You're yelling at them. When I talk to parents, I say, when you start a conversation and you talk to your kids like that, you're painting the picture of, I'm the authority, listen to me, listen up when you're getting loud. And nobody wants to be, essentially, they're talking down to their kids. Nobody wants to be talked down to. So I say to parents, when you have this conversation, talk with them as you're talking to a peer, like this, in this voice. And just let them know that I'm just a little concerned something's going on. If you are going through a tough moment, I'm here for you. I want to help you. I don't want to ground you, get you in trouble. The only thing I'm here for is to help you, because you're my son, you're my daughter, and I love you. And I don't want you to go down the road that so many do. Now, I will say this, though. I have found over the years, parents, they yell, they get mad, they get pissed because they're nervous, because they're concerned, they're afraid. They don't know how else to react in that moment. I have found this with a lot of parents, and that is, they're afraid of what's going to happen to their son, to their daughter, if they keep making these choices, if they're making these unhealthy choices. They're afraid of the road they're going to go down, what can happen with them. And so they lash out in the sense of yelling, in the sense of coming at this conversation as talking down to the person, because that's their first initial reaction. They're scared. They don't know what to do. Instead of coming at the conversation more softly, instead of talking to the person like they're a peer. Because for me, when I talk with parents, I talk about, you need to show your kids that they can trust you. And that isn't always an easy thing for parents to do. When we talk about a trusted, keyword, trusted adult, someone I feel like I can trust to have this conversation with whatever it is I'm going through, whether I'm struggling in school and I don't know what to do, but I'm embarrassed, I don't want to say anything to anybody, whether I'm going through anxiety, depression, whether I am having trouble making friends at school, whatever it is, being able to have an adult I can trust. The key word, because there's plenty of adults in their life, but who can they trust? And so one of the things I talk about with parents is, when you talk to your kids, talk with them as though they're a peer. Don't talk down with them. A lot of times, parents talk with them like they're the authority figure, and you're going to listen to me, and what I say goes, and if you don't like what the rules are in this house, you can leave, because I pay the bills, I put the food on the table, and that's right. All of that is 100% right. But is that going to get your kid to open up to you? No. Is that going to get your kid to trust you? No. That's going to get your kid to actually maybe push back. That's going to get your kid actually maybe scared to open up to you.
Parents, ever feel the frustration of the volume surge? You know, when you catch yourself raising your voice to make a point? Imagine a different approach. A calm chat navigating disagreements with phrases like, I hear you, and let's figure this out together. Feel the difference? Now, what about those order overload moments? Instead of constant orders, picture yourself offering your kids choices. What's the best way to tackle cleaning your room? Toys or clothes first? Are you curious to know more? I've uncovered game-changing insights in my new free guide called Avoid These 10 Communication Pitfalls and Learn What to Do Instead. In it, I dive into practical tips that transform parent-child communication. And hey, I get it. Parenting is a journey, and I'm here to help you navigate it. Go to unlockyourchildsfullpotential.com/cheat sheet and download the free guide to discover secrets to smoother, more effective communication with your kids. The link is also in the show notes.
It's so important as parents, if you're listening and maybe your son, your daughter is struggling, you have a hunch they are, or in the future when they are going through something that's tough and really affecting their life, to just sit them down and say, look, I'm not here to yell at you, to reprimand you. I am just here to help you because you're my son, you're my daughter, and I want the best for you. And that's it. That's all I want to do. If you're going through something, I want to help you through that thing. That's all. And I believe that when they hear that, as a parent, you'll have a better chance of them coming to you when they're struggling than if you were to yell at them. So that's, one of the things I talk about. The other two things I talk about that I think is important for parents to hear is being vulnerable with them. For me, this is the secret sauce right here. Being vulnerable with your kids. Because a lot of the times as parents, you think, I have to be this person that's like perfect. It's my kid. And if they look up to me and maybe they ask me a question and I don't know the answer, or they know maybe some struggles I've been through in my life, they're going to look at me different. They're not going to look up to me. But again, when we talk about being a parent, we talk about them trusting you when they're going through a difficult moment, you being vulnerable, you letting them know some things you've gone through in your life. Again, when they're going through that tough moment, they are going to think about you and coming to you. Why? Because you let your guard down to them. You became vulnerable to them. And you talk with them about something in your life you've gone through. Now, I think it's hugely important to understand, if you're listening, you're a parent, then I'm not saying you have to tell your son or daughter your deepest, darkest secret. I'm not saying that. You can, if you feel comfortable, go ahead. But you don't have to. What I am saying is, on some level that you feel comfortable with, but it has to be on some level, you become vulnerable with them. And you talk with them about one or two few things you've gone through in your life over a period that you struggled with.
I love that.
Because again, think about this for a second. You're a parent and you've let them know you struggled and they're struggling. It's like, mom, dad, they may get this. They may understand what I'm going through. I remember when they told me about this time they struggled. I remember when they told me about that time I struggled. That, again, that's going to get them to come to you, have a better chance of them coming to you versus not coming to you. But as parents, where it's no, I can't let them know what I'm going through. I have to be perfect in my kids' eyes. Well, I should be careful when I say this, but I think the more we open up to our kids, more vulnerable, and they see that we're not perfect, then they understand that, well, I don't have to be perfect. Mom and dad aren't perfect. So it's okay if I'm struggling.
Yeah, so true. And talking about drugs, do you think it's a good thing to share about our own experience with drugs and draw some lessons from that?
Yes, I do. If we've had them, 100%. 100% I do. Because we all make mistakes in life. And for your kids to hear the mistakes you've made, I think it's crucial. You let them know if you've used drugs before, that you used them and what it did to you, how it affected you, and how hard it was to stop. But if you stopped, okay. But if you're struggling, to let them know, be honest, like, look, I'm going through a difficult moment in my life right now, not to hide it from them. So if you are using, not to hide it from them. And again, I guess that would depend actually on, I guess I would take that back because it depends on their age, right? Let's say they're in high school. I would be open to them and just let them know and not hide things, because eventually they're going to find out, right? So I would say for me, yes, not hiding things, just being honest with your past or the present, what you're going through.
Okay.
And then I think the last thing I talk about with adults, how to become that trusted adult, is getting to know your son and daughter. Whenever I say this, adults look at me like, I know my son and daughter. But then I say, but do you really? do you really know the world that your son and daughter lives in? And then they'll say, well, yeah, I was in high school once. I was in middle school once. And then I say to them, yeah, but don't you think it's a little different nowadays than when you were in high school? Did they have Snapchat? Did they have Instagram? Did they have TikTok? Did they have did you have all the pressures right now your son, your daughter has going on in their life? With all of these things that are just bombarded at them, that even me growing up, I didn't have. There are all these social media platforms. There are all these standards we have for kids. They're all, like having these friend groups. It's just, there's so much for these kids to go through. There's so much stress. There's so much pressure. There's just so many standards. And when the kids don't meet those standards, they can crumble. But back in the day, mom and dad had the attitude of put your head down and get through it. You shouldn't have to ask for help, right? And so I think that that mentality has been adopted a lot of times with kids. But it's just, it's important that, the kids nowadays understand that they're going through a lot. There's a lot to being a teenager. I say to myself quite often and think, I feel bad for these teens. There's so much that they go through now that I didn't go through, that you didn't go through, that parents didn't go through. And so we need to understand on some level the lives that they're living. We need to get into their world and really understand, because again, as a son, as a daughter, when you're going through something and maybe you get in an argument, a lot of times, I know my brother, a lot of times me, my other brothers would say to my parents, you don't get it. You don't get what I'm going through, because my life was different than my mother and father's life. So if we understand, in a sense, the world that they live in, what's going on in their life, and they see that we understand that as parents, that might give them a little bit more trust to approach you as a parent to ask for help. Because again, think about this. If I'm struggling, and I think to myself, mom and dad don't get what I'm going through. They don't get the world that I'm living in right now. They're much older. I'm not going to go to them. But if your son or daughter thinks they seem to understand a little bit of my world, then that's going to gain more trust for them. So for parents, get to know your son or daughter, the world that they're living in. Be vulnerable with them on the level you feel comfortable. And then when sitting down and having these conversations, come at them soft, come at them like you're talking to a peer. Don't yell at them, talk down with them, talk on their level like you two are pairs. Those are the three biggest things I talk to parents about when I talk to becoming a trusted adult. I think those are three huge things that can really gain your son or daughter's trust over time.
That's great advice. I love it. And what about if we don't seem to become the trusted adult in their lives? Will it be helpful to find somebody to guide them to another person who will be that for them?
Yes. And so here's a great analogy I heard, and I always love to use it. Right now, you're not the trusted adult in their life that they need. Okay. Think about it like this. Kids don't love broccoli, right? All kids don't love their vegetables. So right now, you're the vegetable on the shelf, and they're not reaching for you. They're reaching for the sweet candy that they love to eat. But eventually in their life, they're going to reach for the broccoli. They're going to come to you. But yes, you hit it on the head. Putting people in their life. That's why it's so important that you're careful with the adults that you let in your kids' lives. Putting people in your son or daughter's life that can be that trusted adult. If they play an instrument, maybe it's that instructor. If they play a sport, maybe it's that sport coach. Maybe it's a specific teacher at their school. Or if they're doing ballet, their ballet teacher. But just being able to have other people in their life to be that trusted adult is huge. Because in that moment, as I said, you're the broccoli on the shelf, and they don't want to reach for you right now. Something else is a little sweeter out there. Something else is a little bit more appealing. And that is that sweet candy. And that may be their sport coach. That may be their ballerina instructor. That may be their instrument instructor. to talk with them about, and they've created a great relationship with them. So yeah, I think that's huge, 100%.
Awesome. And what about some practical advice on how to deal with those negative feelings you're sometimes experiencing? How can you make yourself feel better without numbing the pain? A healthy reaction, aside from asking for help. Sometimes they're not going to come to us, but we can teach them, like, be proactive and give them some strategies, little strategies to use to navigate their feelings, their emotions.
I think the biggest one here is breathing. Just being able to close your eyes, being conscious of your breath, taking a few deep breaths in through the nose, out through the mouth, and really just, because a lot of times when we're in these stressful, struggling, tough moments, it's our mind racing. It's our mind racing, and it's really thinking, when we're talking about anxiety or maybe depression, thinking about things, or let's take anxiety, for example. We're looking forward. We're thinking, we're getting nervous about things, right? It's making us anxious because of maybe something that's going to happen in the future, or maybe it's something that did happen and what's going to result from it later. So our mind starts racing on us. Our heart starts pounding, and we just have all these emotions and feelings, and those emotions and feelings start taking over our thoughts. But if we can just close the eyes, if we can take control of our breath, then that will be able to calm those emotions and those feelings down. And we can get somewhat control of our thoughts and our emotions. When we talk about anxiety, essentially what we're talking about here is not having control. But if we can have control, as again, somewhat, because we're not always going to have full control, but if we can get somewhat control of those emotions and feelings and calm down our thinking and bring that heart rate down, then that's really going to help us in a lot of different situations. Another great one is journaling, writing out your feelings, your thoughts, putting the pen on the paper. And not hopping on your computer, writing it out in a journal just hits a different way up here.
I agree. I love journaling. Amazing information. So thankful for you sharing the story and being vulnerable here. Is there anything else that you would like to share and we didn't touch upon?
I would just like to just emphasize that it's super important that parents understand the effect they can have on their kids when they're able to be seen as a trusted adult. And not to scare parents, but I'm always honest. Their son or daughter is one decision away when they're struggling from going down this road that my brother went down, or going down this road and really getting help. And the parents can be the person that helps them to go down this road if they're seen as a trusted adult. I don't think parents understand or realize how important it is that they are seen, that they can be seen as that trusted adult for their kids and the impact it can have.
That's a huge responsibility, yeah.
It is. It is. Yes, it is. So, being conscious of how we act, being conscious of how we talk with our kids, what we say is so important because it plants seeds in their heads, right? Again, if we're yelling at them, that plants a seed in their head of, if I go to my mother or father and I talk about this, they may yell at me. I don't want to be yelled at, so they don't go to you. That's when they maybe think, but I don't want to feel like this anymore. I don't want to go through the struggle, this pain, this suffering. And so instead of going to mom or dad, I'm going to start drinking to get rid of this feeling because I just don't want to feel like this anymore.
Yeah. Wow. Would you like to tell people how they can connect with you and learn more from you?
Yeah. So my website is Eric, E-R-I-C, last name Daddario, DADDARIO.com, ericdaddario.com. My Instagram is just Eric Daddario. My LinkedIn is Eric Daddario, and my Facebook is Eric Daddario. I'm also on TikTok. So I'm on a lot of the platforms. And if you want to shoot me an email, my email is Eric, E-R-I-C, at, all one word here, thedecisionswemake.com. Whether you have questions about anything on here, more than willing to answer. Whether you want to contact me to hire me to bring me in to talk at your school, a community event, or to athletic program or parents, would love to hear from you and talk to you about how I can help.
Amazing. Thank you. I'll put those in the show notes.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for listening and letting me be a part of your day. If you enjoyed this episode or the show in general, please share it with a friend and help me reach more moms around the world. Also, if you find some value in this podcast and would like to help support it, please visit my Ko-fi page. The link is in the show notes. Any contribution is much appreciated. And lastly, don't forget to subscribe so you get notified when a new episode drops. I'll see you next week.